Okay, so we have an interesting guest coming up shortly. It's that time of year, Valentine's Day, and I'm sure plenty of people will be thinking about what they're going to do on Valentine's Day. But let's have a look and explore. And I'm sure a lot of people prefer to stay in as well. I think sometimes it's a nice cozy night in, but we'll get more of an insight in terms of what people's thoughts are. Donna Dawson, personality and behavioral psychologist, is going to give us an insight into, staying in is the new going out. Donna, welcome to the show. Great to have you on board.
Hi, Jimmy. Yes, this research is very interesting. DFS commissioned research to investigate British couples' dating habits. And the research shows that dating and romance have shifted away from nights out and more to having date night in. So half of British couples this Valentine's night will be snuggling on the settee, not going anywhere.
That's really interesting. And why is there sort of any insight, Donna, with your expertise in behaviour? Why is that the case? What's your take on it? What does the research say?
Well, the obvious one, I think, without being too romantic but more practical, is the cost of living and the expense of going out now. But also what's come up in the interviews is that I think COVID, when we had to stay in, has made us aware of some of the benefits of being able to be in your own familiar space and being in control of that, being able to make it what you want. I think the idea that a couple has a room like a living room where they can make it special for a date night in, soft lighting and candles and maybe some throws and blankets and just create an atmosphere maybe with music as well. That's their space. They're in control. On a night that's been hyped up and the restaurant's overbooked and the waiting is long and the service is bad and the food doesn't live up to expectations, your great hopes for a wonderful night out are dashed. Whereas when you're at home and you take a familiar, comfortable area and make it a little bit more special, you're in control. You set the tone, you set the agenda. You can dress up, you can dress down, you can cook together, or you can order a takeaway. You can watch TV, or you can sit and chat, or you can play a board game, which came up in the DFS survey. So there's lots of things you could do. But I think apart from being mentally comfortable in where you are, there's also physical comfort. And 22% of those interviewed said they would most likely buy a new settee for Valentine's Day just so they could be comfortable sitting together. Because I think that's important. And it came up in the top 20 tips on how to keep the spark alive was the idea that you're physically relaxed. You're able to sit together, maybe hold hands, maybe cuddle, give each other a massage. So there's a whole physical element to this as well. But on the whole, I would have to say romance has changed. We've gotten away from chocolates and roses and much more to just enjoying each other's company, having a laugh. And in fact, number one on the sparks of relationships came friendship. A good friendship with trust and loyalty was more important to helping you relax and have a good night in than almost anything else.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's some really, really good points you've made there, Donna, especially sort of going out. Sometimes you just want that, intimacy, that sort of connection. And, if you're out there and there's a lot of people in the restaurant, and there's noise and everything else that's sort of going on. Don't get me wrong. I'm sure a lot of people, certainly I enjoy going out, has its place too. But I think there's a sort of connection and, having that familiar surrounding as well, sort of being at home, the comfort of your own home as well. What do you think, sort of anyone sort of considering maybe who's thinking, going out this Valentine's, rather than sort of booking and all the things that sort of go with it, what are some of the things, any sort of tips they can do to make the evening special for them? I know you've mentioned a couple of things there that are high on the list, but what else can they sort of do?
And I'm a big one for, not just having a date in for Valentine's night, but do it regularly because the relationship needs nurturing. And even though 83% of people interviewed said, passion is difficult to keep up long term, I would agree with that. And, life gets in the way, whether it's, long job hours or money worries or, busy with the kids or just basically human nature when you end up taking each other for granted. I think these are things that people have realized now, and that may have been more as a result of COVID as well. So that they're not looking for, those huge hits of romance that just happen now and then, because then everyone's realized you can't keep that going after the first 6 months of a relationship. What you need is the foundation of a much longer relationship, which everyone has agreed is friendship, is loyalty, is a sense of humor. And there are lots of things about having a good laugh in the top 20 that, like good-natured ribbing of each other, in jokes, remembering funny times you had together. Because actually laughter is very good at turning up the feel-good hormones in the body, which help you to bond. So, there is some medicine in that, which people understand on an instinctive level. But, it is about being comfortable where you are. It's about making a bit of an effort. So I would say try and put a regular date night in the diary. You've both got the date. You're both going to help in the preparation. You're not going to leave the work just to one partner. You're going to decide what you actually want. Do you want to cook together? And if so, what? You need to agree. Or are you going to get a takeaway? Are you going to watch TV? And if so, what? Because you don't want to be watching your favorite film and your partner's asleep because they're not interested. So, but I would also say, apart from, no distractions and privacy, and maybe the kids are up with their grandparents, find some time just to talk about your relationship, you in a nice kind of way, like, where are we going? What do we want from this relationship? How do we each feel about how things are? In a kind of non-judgmental, non-accusatory way, like you can talk about how you feel. I feel this, or I feel that. Because I think quality time is great, but if you're just spending it watching a screen, you might be relaxing, but you haven't got that depth going on of knowing how good the relationship is. I think good communication is really important. So, just from my perspective, of course, I would say this as a psychologist, have some, good time to chat, and not about money worries, not about the kids, not about what happened in the day that, made you angry. But, more lighthearted, but also maybe talk about how you both feel about the relationship, because sometimes one partner will think, oh, this is great, we're doing really well. And the other partner might think, I'm not all that happy, and maybe some things need to change. So that's kind of the time to do that. And I don't think you have to do that all the time, but I think you need to check in every now and then to make sure you're both on the same wavelength. But, romance is a huge spectrum. For some people, they still want to dress up and, cook a nice meal. Other people just want to slob out in their joggers and have a takeaway, so whatever floats your boat, really.
Absolutely, yeah. I was thinking more along the lines, Donna, of watching the football on TV.
Oh, were you? That would be fun.
Owning a pizza and getting the football on, and that's probably not very romantic by many people's imagination. But no, so I think you made some really great points there. I think sometimes it's sort of like that connection, isn't it? Where sometimes we kind of drift away and it's like life takes over and there's so many things that are going on and just taking time to reconnect. But I think you made a really interesting point and something that resonates with me. I think that the time over the pandemic was a lot of reflecting for a lot of people, and I certainly can resonate with that, where I wouldn't say I'm a different person, but I feel certainly, introspectively afterwards, you kind of reevaluate your life, Don. You kind of realize what really is important to you type thing. And I think if you ask what was important to me before the pandemic and afterwards, completely different. Values are completely changed.
Yeah. And it was interesting that furniture played a role in this. 22% said they wanted to order a new settee for Valentine's night because maybe the one they have isn't conducive to two people sitting together and holding hands. And I would certainly be in agreement with that, because I remember spending one Valentine's night. My husband was in his very comfortable settee, his recliner, and I was on the settee by myself, and I could not get him to come over. And it turned out that he was too tall, and the settee was not comfortable for him. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
Furniture can have but DFS have a wonderful website, Jimmy. They've got top tips for date night in, and they've got something called sofa etiquette. How you sit on the sofa and what that says about your relationship. Very interesting. So DFS.co.
Brilliant. Yeah, no, absolutely. And in terms of your work, Don, if anyone sort of wants to know a bit more what you do type thing and sort of is interested in around these, is there any way you can direct them? Like, do you have a website as well they can check out if they want to sort of learn more about your sort of work as well?
Oh, I think it's just donnadawson.co.uk, but thank
Yeah,
you
no,
for
no.
asking.
I think it's really interesting. I think the work you do is really fascinating, to be fair. I think this is a huge part of everyone's life, really. I think that, yeah, it's one of them, isn't it? It's just, obviously.
Jimmy, I'll tell you, human nature doesn't change even over the generations. But we are seeing a shift now to what's more important in keeping a relationship going long term, rather than just those quick romantic passionate hits. Because passion is great, but I think we can keep it up for about 6 months to a year, and after that, we settle into a kind of a steady plateau of hopefully mutual trust, acceptance, love and comfort. And that's what you need long term. You need someone you can talk to who's a good friend to you. And that's what, when we're growing up, which I think is wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting you say that, Donna. I know we sort of pressed for time, but what's really interesting I find, Donna, sort of this day and age, with sort of social media, you kind of see one perception, people kind of making out to be they've got this sort of perfect relationship on social media. But I've met so many people over a long time, and what they kind of show to the world is so different to reality. Away from social media, they kind of, they're fighting, arguing all the time, and they just invest so much time to prove to the world that they've got this. And it's sort of head why, I'm sure there's validation comes into it, many other reasons, but do you not find that social media's kind of changed people's relationships as well? Like that they try and portray this
it's
perfection?
a place to pretend to live up to your ideal. But people know every relationship has its ups and downs and its issues. And I would say, please don't get jealous of what seems to be a perfect relationship online, because we all know it isn't. But it's all in us to want to brag and to be competitive with each other and to have the best. But the truth is, that's the place to escape and pretend to be in our ideal world. What's going on now is that we're slowly adjusting to reality. So I predict a time when, social media is not going to have such a huge effect upon us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for a lot of people, that's sort of already beginning. And certainly for me, it's kind of, social media as well. Not a great deal, but every now and again. But you kind of, can use the share, connect with people around the world type thing. But that's a really interesting point you've made there. And certainly a lot of people kind of, spend so much time sort of comparing. But, some really good words of wisdom there where at the end of the day, I think that, certainly reassuring for people who probably think others have got this sort of perfect,
none of us do, Jimmy. None of us do. And that's the reality we have to live with. We have to make our own reality better.
Absolutely. Thanks for your time, Donna. It's been great speaking to you.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Have a great day. Thank you. Take care.
You too.